The solicitor coughed, adjusting his spectacles. "Miss Eleanor Ainsworth, this is a surprise." Eleanor sat stiffly, a knot of dread twisting in her stomach. "Is it about my great-uncle's estate?" "Indeed. He left everything to you." He handed her a silver-sealed envelope. "His will stipulated you read this alone." Eleanor's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. The parchment smelled faintly of mildew and something else, something acrid, like burnt herbs. Great-uncle Alfred's spidery handwriting filled the page, each loop and swirl a tendril of unease creeping up her spine. He wrote of the family home, Blackwood Manor, her inheritance, her burden. He wrote of secrets, of shadows, of a darkness that clung to the house. He warned her not to stay, to sell Blackwood and never look back. Eleanor stared at the final line, the ink seemingly bleeding into the parchment. "Heed my warning, Eleanor. Some doors are best left unopened, some truths better left buried." Blackwood Manor loomed above the village, perched atop Widow's Hill like a watchful gargoyle. The wind howled through the ancient oaks, their branches clawing at the grey sky. The cab driver had refused to go further, his face pale, eyes wide with superstitious fear. Eleanor stepped out of the carriage, her breath catching in her throat. The house was imposing, its stone facade blackened with age. Ivy, thick and gnarled, snaked across the walls like grasping claws. Shutters banged against the stone, driven by the relentless wind. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Drawing in a shaky breath, Eleanor approached the imposing oak door, its surface carved with grotesque faces, their expressions contorted in silent screams. She raised a trembling hand and knocked. The sound echoed through the silence, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with a groan of rusted hinges, the door creaked open as if beckoning her inside. Dust motes danced in the weak shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom. Cobwebs clung to every surface, thick and grey, like shrouds. The air was stagnant, heavy with the scent of must and decay, the silence broken only by the scuttling of unseen things. Eleanor wandered through darkened corridors, her footsteps echoing on the worn flagstones. Each room seemed to hold its breath, trapped in a time capsule of forgotten memories. Faded grandeur clung to the house like a shroud, threadbare tapestries depicting hunting scenes now populated by lurking shadows, once gleaming chandeliers now draped in cobwebs, their crystals dull and lifeless. In the grand dining hall, a long oak table stretched beneath a dusty chandelier. Eleanor ran her fingers along its surface, tracing the grooves carved by generations past. She could almost hear the echo of their laughter, the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversations long faded into silence. But beneath it all, a current of unease thrummed through her, a sense of unseen eyes watching her every move. As days bled into nights, the silence of Blackwood Manor became a presence itself, a constant companion, whispering her name in the dead hours, toying with the fringes of her sanity. Floorboards creaked beneath her feet even when she stood still. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, gone when she turned her head. Once she awoke to the sound of music drifting from the abandoned ballroom. A haunting waltz played on a piano she knew to be untouched for decades. The melody seemed to seep into her very bones, its mournful tune a harbinger of something sinister. The whispers grew stronger, morphing into hushed voices, too low to decipher but filled with an undeniable malice. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, the very fabric of Blackwood Manor alive with unseen entities. Or perhaps, Eleanor thought, her mind teetering on the precipice of fear, they were merely figments of her imagination, fueled by the oppressive atmosphere of the house. She discovered the journals in the attic, tucked away in a dusty trunk beneath a moth-eaten tapestry. Bound in leather, the pages brittle with age, they chronicled great-uncle Alfred's descent into the occult. His obsession with the unseen world, with contacting the dead, leapt from the pages, his elegant script growing more frantic, more unhinged with each passing entry. He wrote of rituals, of sacrifices, of ancient beings with unpronounceable names. He wrote of a power that pulsed beneath Blackwood Manor, a darkness that whispered to him, seduced him with promises of forbidden knowledge. One passage sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. "The veil is thin here," Alfred had written, his words a dark stain on the yellowed parchment. "Blackwood is a conduit, a gateway to something else. I can feel it watching me, whispering to me. It yearns for release." The final entry ended abruptly, mid-sentence, leaving Eleanor with a chilling sense of foreboding. Driven by a morbid curiosity, Eleanor found herself drawn back to the attic. She arranged the dusty furniture, a table, 3 chairs, just as Alfred had described in his journals. Candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls as she placed the objects of power, a crystal ball, a deck of tarot cards, a silver atham glinting wickedly in the dim light. The air grew thick, charged with an unseen energy. The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a vortex of malevolent whispers. Eleanor closed her eyes, her heart pounding against her ribs, and began to speak the incantation she'd found scrawled in the margins of Alfred's journal. The room seemed to contract, the air growing thin and cold. A low hum vibrated through the floorboards, resonating in her teeth. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Eleanor opened her eyes, a sense of disappointment washing over her. Had it worked? Had she truly contacted Lee? A scratching sound from behind the tapestry startled her. Eleanor spun around, her heart pounding in her chest. The tapestry swayed slightly, as if disturbed by a gust of wind, though the air in the attic remained unnervingly still. Curiosity overriding her fear, Eleanor approached the tapestry, her hand trembling as she reached out to pull it back. Behind it, concealed by the heavy fabric and years of dust, lay a door that had not been visible before. The door was old, crafted from a dark, heavy wood that seemed to absorb the light. There was no handle, no hinges, no indication of how it opened. It looked as if it had been carved directly from the bones of the house, a hidden portal to some forgotten, forbidden place. With a grunt of effort, Eleanor managed to pry the door open. It swung inwards with a low groan, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. The air that wafted out was stale and cold, carrying with it the scent of decay and something else, something acrid and ancient, like the breath of a tomb. Steeling herself, Eleanor stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that sent a shiver down her spine. She found herself in a small circular chamber. Torches flickered in brackets along the rough-hewn stone walls, casting eerie, dancing shadows that stretched and contorted as if alive. In the centre of the chamber stood an altar, fashioned from a single slab of black marble. Strange symbols etched into the surface and picked out in what looked disturbingly like dried blood seemed to writhe and coil in the flickering torchlight. The air hummed with a palpable energy, a sense of something ancient and powerful lurking just beyond the veil of reality. As Eleanor approached the altar, her hand drawn to the intricate symbols etched into its surface, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Carved into the stone wall, almost invisible at first glance, was a face. No, not a carving, she realized with a growing sense of horror, but a part of the wall itself. The face was contorted in a silent scream, its eyes wide and staring, frozen in an eternity of agony. As she stared at it, transfixed, she realized it wasn't alone. More faces, contorted in various expressions of horror and despair, stared back at her from the walls of the chamber, their gazes filled with a silent, accusing knowledge. The humming in the air intensified and the symbols on the altar began to glow with a malevolent light. The temperature plummeted and Eleanor could feel her breath frosting in the air. A low, guttural growl echoed through the chamber, seemingly emanating from the very stones themselves. The walls, Eleanor realized with a dawning terror, were not just watching her, they were alive.